You were cruel and mean right from the start. Now you can truly say you have no heart. Good evening, everyone. This is Stone Gasman live from New York City. And tonight we are going to be doing two audio commentaries for two horror anthologies, British horror anthologies from 1972 from Amicus Productions. The first one being Tales from the Crypt, 1972, and the other one, Asylum. And like I said, these are both anthologies with a number of familiar faces in the casts, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. I think we're definitely going to have a lot of fun with this double feature. Just to say hi real quick to Katrina in the chat. Lovely to see you tonight. And Luke, good evening, everyone. Good evening to you, sir. Absolutely. Yes. All right. So tell you what, everyone, I am paused on a screen with a blue background. Metro Media Producers Corporation. I have provided the link for Tales from the Crypt on YouTube there. And I really honestly had never seen these movies before. I don't watch a lot of anthology movies, although I've seen my fair share, and I'll mention a few more when we get into these commentaries. But I knew that I wanted to choose a horror anthology for this year, and I came to find out, wow, there's actually two of them. But what I didn't know when I selected both of them for a double feature, I thought, well, I didn't know they came from the same production company too. Apparently, Amicus Productions, did their fair share of horror anthologies back in the day. Well, we're about to enjoy two of them tonight. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Rob Gasper, also great to see you, sir. Yes. Yeah. Greetings to everybody in the chat. Everybody's saying hi to each other. This is so awesome. All right. So, yeah. And so the second film I'm going to do on a separate stream. I'm going to do Asylum on another stream. I will provide the link when we get close to the end of Tales from the Crypt. And you can just easily jump on over there. Rob in the house. Hey. Oh man, it's so cool. I'm getting an audience tonight because, like I said, you're going to see a lot of familiar faces. There's going to be a lot of horror moments that actually come off as very amusing and maybe even a little bit funny intentionally. So, like I said, there's quite a bit to enjoy with these two movies. But at any rate, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm paused on Metro Media Producers Corporation, and we will start on 3, 2, 1, and play. I just muted the sound in a split second right there. Metro Media Producers Corporation. Mm-hmm. And we open up already on like a creepy manor of sorts. Yeah. Now, Tales from the Crypt is, as many people know nowadays because of the television incarnations that appeared in the 1990s, Amicus production, Tales from the Crypt. I was about to say Tales from the Script. Yes. Starring Joan Collins, Dame Joan Collins, absolutely. The great Peter Cushing, Roy Deutris, who we got a lot to talk about with all these cast members, Ian Hendry, Patrick McGee, oh yeah, Barbara Murray, and like I said, there'll be plenty more in Asylum when we get to that one later. But like I said, we need to do Tales from the Crypt first. So this was based on a series of 1950s horror magazines, basically called Tales from the Crypt and Vaults of Horror. Now, I've never read any of these magazines before. However, they did inspire Shane, trained by Michael Walsh. Oh, yeah, we'll meet Shane. Shane's coming in the last story. We're definitely going to meet Shane. Based on stories written by Al Fieldstein, Johnny Craig, and Bill Gaines, originated in the magazines. Music composed and conducted by Douglas Gamley. Yep. So, yeah, and these series of magazines in the 1950s evidently inspired several other horror anthologies later, notably Creep Show from George A. Romero and Stephen King. And then of course the 1990s movies and television series, which we can talk about later. I honestly have never seen an episode of the show. I've seen the Gatekeeper in like numerous or no, the Crypt Keeper. Excuse me. Yeah, not the Gatekeeper, the Crypt Keeper. Need to keep it. Need to need to keep it straight here. Yeah. So the Crypt Keeper, of course, is famous in all those shows and everything. Here, he's actually played by an actual flesh and blood human being. Although, well, actually, maybe not. Maybe not. Not human being is the word to describe it. I mean, he's more like death in this movie. You know, basically a messenger of death. Directed by Freddie Francis. Absolutely. And we'll get started here with Tales from the Crypt. All right, let's see. And like I said, this came from Amicus Productions, and they were based at Shepperton Studios in England, and they were active between 62 and 77, only for 15 years. Prior to establishing Amicus, its two producers collaborated on the successful horror film The City of the Dead. And the first two films were low budget musicals for the teenage market, It's Trad Dad and Just for Fun. Amicus is best remembered for making a series of portmanteau horror anthologies inspired by the Ealing Studios film Dead of Night. Now, I was going to mention Dead of Night, and I actually do have a copy of it behind me somewhere. I didn't have time to find it. But Dead of Night is probably, in my book, the greatest horror anthology ever made. It came out in 1945, and it's most famous for the climactic sequence of Michael Redgrave with his murderous ventriloquist dummy. And it's very famous for those sequences, but it's also just a great anthology on its own. I mean, a model for others to follow, truly. And they also made some straight thriller films, often based on a gimmick. Amicus's horror and thriller films are sometimes mistaken for the output of the better-known Hammer Film Productions due to the two companies' similar visual style and use of the same actors, including Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Now, Christopher Lee is nowhere to be seen in these two anthologies. However, Peter Cushing will be popping up in both. And of course, as most people know Peter Cushing from, is Grand Moff Tarkin in the very first Star Wars movie. Unlike the period Gothic Hammer films, Amicus productions were usually set in the present day. Amicus's portmanteau films include these are all the horror anthologies they made. Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, directed by Freddie Francis, Torture Garden, 1967, The House That Dripped Blood, Tales from the Crypt, Asylum, which is what we'll be watching here at 10:35 p.m. Eastern, Vault of Horror, 1973, here again taking its title from another magazine along with Tales from the Crypt. And finally, From Beyond the Grave, 1974. These films typically feature 4 or sometimes 5 short horror stories linked by an overarching plot featuring a narrator and those listening to his story. So in Tales from the Crypt, in this circumstance, you have, just 5 random people in these catacombs. They say don't get lost and everything, but they're led into kind of a trap here. They have no idea who they are. They never met each other, and I like how spooky this film begins without getting really menacing or terrifying, and there's a gleeful sense of humor that runs in a lot of these stories. Here again, I mean, I can imagine these EC comics having exactly the same type of tone and color schemes and everything. Even though I've never seen any of them, even the television shows with the animatronic Crypt Keeper. But yeah, they're basically just led into an empty chamber right here, which is pretty cool. Nice 360 shot right there. Now, all these actors, I'm not going to be able to name all of them off the top of my head right now, but obviously, probably the most recognizable to audiences is the lone female of the quintet, which happens to be Joan Collins, the British actress who is now Dame Joan Collins, by the way. She is most famous to American audiences as being Carrington, Miss Carrington in Dynasty. Now, I never watched Dynasty, but my mother surely did. But even more, next to Dame Joan Collins, we also have Sir Ralph Richardson here as the Crypt Keeper. So in this movie, it's Sir Ralph Richardson. It is not an animatronic. So I think that some fans of that show from the 90s, when they see this, they're kind of like, oh my God, what? It's like watching Star Wars. It's like watching the original cut of Star Wars with a human being actually playing Jabba the Hutt. And then later they changed it to this grotesque slug. But okay, so here we begin the very first story, which of course will have Joan Collins. And I got a few more things to say about Joan Collins, by the way. But this segment is called "And All Through the House." So it is a Christmas horror segment. I guess it might have been more appropriate to do this commentary at Christmas time, but whatever. The rest of the stories have plenty to make up for in terms of, Halloween horror, I guess you could say. But this is a Christmas terror tale where, okay, so Joan Collins, basically just lives in this house with her husband, Richard, and he is, of course, notably older than her. Of course, it's funny that, of course, she's now, Joan Collins is now 89. She's going to turn 90 next year. And she's married to somebody who is 32 years her junior. By all accounts, the relationship has been a fabulous success. And hey, she doesn't hold back in telling the media how she's grateful for having such a great sex in the past 50 years. But look, look, get it, girl. That's all I'm saying. Get it, girl. But she's still honored by many people. I mean, I think her opinion on the Brexit has been very controversial, indeed. But the TV series are really fun too. Yeah, like I said, I know a lot of people that like the series. I know a lot of people that have liked the series and watched the series. I think the only thing I saw of any of that was Bordello of Blood, and I don't remember a thing about it. I just remember Dennis Miller being unfunny as hell. But as you can see right here, Joan Collins just murdered her husband. Not in real life. No, in the movie. Breaking news. No. On the BBC. But yeah, anyway, she just killed her husband. So, but she's going to run into an issue or two trying to dispose of the body and everything, and also have an unwelcome visitor. Definitely so. But let's talk about Joan Collins for a bit more, because I've seen a fair number of things that she's done, believe it or not. But of course, I also know some of the more juicy things about her life, and like she had a serious, heavy affair with Warren Beatty for a number of years. I mean, she just said, "Hey, he just kept coming back for sex," Hey, what are you going to object? Well, you could. But yeah, I mean, she had this long, heavy affair with Warren Beatty for a number of years. The first time I ever saw Joan Collins, however, is that she played a villain. She played a guest villain on the Batman series. She was known as the Siren in the third series episode. And I just remember her just being, sexy as fuck. Okay, I'm just being honest. Okay, I mean, and that show was made in the 60s. That was back when she was, still in her 30s. But the thing is that it's because of that. Well, okay. After I saw her in that Batman episode, the next thing I saw Joan Collins in was this horrible, horrible horror film from 1975 called The Devil Within Her, where basically her baby is possessed by a dwarf who she rejected their advances at the strip club that she works at. So the rest of the movie has the baby just murdering, the adults that are around it, and it's so those murder scenes with like the baby just like pushing a full grown adult male into a river, or just all this crap. I mean, they pronounce devil as Devil. Yeah, I believe that the baby is possessed by the devil. I mean, and it's terrible. It was from one of the Hammer horror directors, and it was trying to pass itself off as a Rosemary's Baby Exorcist ripoff. And the original British title I actually really like. It's called I Don't Want to Be Born. And that's how it should be known as. But look, unfortunately, I mean, when you're a budding teenager in the 1990s, look, sooner or later you're gonna buy stuff that your parents don't want you to know that you bought. And look, when I was 13 years old, I am ashamed to say I bought this. Now, this is based on Jackie Collins' best-selling book about the Jet Set crowd, and Joan Collins actually starred in both movie versions of her sister's books. The first one being The Stud in 1978, which is, to my mind, unwatchable. I can actually watch this, but I can't watch The Stud. And this was right before her Dynasty fame in America, where she was in her late 40s, and she decided to show a little skin in some of her movies, and movies like this were the result, and they became massive hits in England, not necessarily the United States. But she became a box office sensation in the United Kingdom in the late 1970s and early 1980s. So, and in this particular movie, she plays I mean, it's fun. The only great moment in the movie, in my opinion, is when John Ratzenberger from Cheers goes on for about 17 minutes on how much of a bitch that Joan Collins actually is. But I mean, look, basically she plays this woman who just got divorced from her husband, and she needs to save her failing London disco called the Hobo. Yeah, that's the name of the disco, the Hobo. Okay, there is a title song by Bidu and Don Black, kung fu fighting and all that. And it's atrocious, but at the same time, it's also, if you like Joan Collins, which I have a thing for Joan Collins, I always have. This is something you definitely want to pick up. I am not joking about that, but not one of the best films in my Blu-ray collection. I don't hold it in very high esteem, but I do have it on Blu-ray, for better or for worse. I actually got it more so for the bonus features than anything else. I mean, to be perfectly honest, but but it's a good watch for those who want bad Joan Collins. Let's just put it that way. But I mean, whatever political comments that she's made in the media, I honestly just don't care. I mean, I kind of grew up watching this woman on the small screen and the big screen, so perfectly fine. It's funny. I mean, I don't think she's made a movie since like, oh man, when she replaced Elizabeth Taylor as Fred Flintstone's mother in the Flintstones prequel Viva Rock Vegas. But yeah, she hasn't done stuff in a few years. I mean, she's been retired. I mean, well yeah, I mean she's been at home a lot. Let's put it that way. But yeah, Alfie Darling. She started out as a beauty queen contestant in 1951's Lady Godiva Rides Again. And in the 70s, she did other movies like Revenge, Quest for Love, The The Man Who Came to Dinner, The Bawdy Adventures of Tom Jones. I remember watching that one as well. Empire of the Ants, Game of Vultures, Homework, Heart to Heart, Two Hearts in Three Quarters Time. Annie, A Royal Adventure, where she played Lady Edwina Hogbottom. And she actually did make a couple movies this year. Tomorrow Morning and The Gentle Sex. Yeah, those are the two movies that Joan Collins filmed this year. So I guess, yeah, she's still acting. She's still doing it. Bless her heart. Honestly, bless her heart. Now, for those paying attention, she actually made several mistakes in carrying out this crime, but she thinks she's gotten every trace of blood, not necessarily, but and of course she's worried about this psychotic Santa Claus that seems to be outside waiting to come in, which is preventing her from reporting the Santa Claus, because if she does, she will incriminate herself with her own crime. But this was taken from the February-March 1954 edition of the Vault of Horror, 1930. Number 35, issue number 35 of the Vault of Horror. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they basically just cherry pick from the magazines, different 5 different stories. But what I love about this movie, I mean, all the stories click. I think all the stories actually work. Now, I don't think this movie is particularly scary. I mean, there are a few moments where I actually jumped, but it's just a lot of fun. I mean, sort of like with Dr. Phibes Rises Again, but without that, overblown, colorful aesthetic. But hey, it's always great to see Joan Collins. It's always great to see Joan. Always great to see Joan. Oh, shit. And yeah, she ends up being strangled here. And that concludes. Oh, look at that phone. that is an old style phone right there. And we find out what her sin is, basically. Yep. Yeah, you're guilty. You're guilty. Now, here we have actor Ian Hendry, who will be the subject of the next story, which is called Reflection of Death. Reflection of Death. This was taken from the April-May 1951 edition of Tales from the Crypt, number 23. So this is actually taken from an actual Tales from the Crypt comic. It's funny, the very last horror anthology I ever watched was VHS. And I like the idea of that, the idea that, people discover this VHS tape in an old house and it has these messed up recordings made from back in the day and they all tell their little stories. I just kind of wish those videos actually look like they were filmed on 1980s video equipment, because they looked modernized to me. I mean, visually at least. And I wish it had actually gone all the way and recreating that 1980s camera style. But I mean, look, horror fans loved it. So I mean, who am I to, say, I mean, in terms of that, but and I remember watching Tales from the Hood, in 1995. That was a very fun horror anthology from back in the day. And I've seen Creep Show before, but man, it's been a while. I remember Leslie Nielsen. I remember Stephen King being covered with, vegetables and plants or whatever. Yeah, he actually starred in the second segment of Creep Show, if you remember. And I also remember all the cockroaches bursting out of the guy's stomach at the end. But I haven't seen that since I was like 15. I mean, that's just what I remember. I probably should return to Creep Show. Red Letter Media just did a terrific review on it not too long ago. But Ian Hendry, I discovered him when I watched a movie that, shall we say, I saw it way too young. I saw it when I was 13 years old. And that movie is Repulsion, directed by Roman Polanski. Ian Hendry plays basically the married lover of Catherine Deneuve's sister. And the idea is that she's suffering from, repulsion, specifically of the male sex. And so when Ian Hendry and her sister go off on a holiday and leaves her in the apartment alone, she basically starts to deteriorate psychologically. And she starts having visions of a man entering her bedroom and raping her on a regular basis. Yes, this is Roman Polanski, 1965, black and white. It was released by the Criterion, by Criterion. And like I said, I saw it at 13. It is without question the most disturbing movie I've ever seen in my life. And it's not even that the rape scenes aren't necessarily graphic, but it's just, here again, it's all the psychological shit. It's all the psychological shit. She starts seeing cracks appear in the walls, hands start coming out of the walls and start grabbing her and, fondling her and everything. And that ending is unforgettable. But man, what it implies is twisted and horrible and disgusting. And at 13 years old, I knew exactly what the hell Roman Polanski was saying with that ending. Look, great performance by Catherine Deneuve. And Ian Hendry, even in his small part, is very good. His reaction at the end to Deneuve's body is great. I've seen him in a number of other British British films that I just can't think of off the top of my head. But let's see, though. Repulsion was 1965, but he was also in The Hill, directed by Sidney Lumet in 65. Casino Royale, the spoof version from 1967. Yes, James Bond is celebrating its 60th anniversary, but anyway. He was also in Get Carter, the original Get Carter, The Jerusalem File, Theater of Blood, Assassin 1973, The Passenger, directed by Michelangelo Antonioni, Damien, Omen 2. And yes, he was also in The Bitch, where he played a mob boss whose name was Thrush Feather. Yeah, he played a mafioso whose name was Thrush Feather. That's not a joke. And that was unfortunately his last movie, pretty much. He passed away in 1984 at the age of 53. And the woman that he has an affair with in this movie is played by Angela Grant, best known for her appearances in the Carry On series from England. She appeared in 4 of them. Prior to beginning her acting career, she was a teenage fashion model for Michael Whitaker. She now does public speaking and work for charity. She lives in London. Mm-hmm. So she's still with us. And I noticed when I checked her filmography before, I couldn't believe what I read here. Her last movie, and she only made like 15 movies. Her last one in 1984 was called The Zany Adventures of Robin Hood, starring George Siegel, Morgan Fairchild, Roddy McDowall, and Tom Baker. And this is basically a parody of the Robin Hood story years before we had Robin Hood Men in Tights. I don't know if it's going to be funny or not. I don't know if I want to give it a shot, but Yeah, she played Lady Exeter in The Zany Adventures of Robin Hood in 1984. But this is like the first story. This is also a relatively short one. I mean, this is only about both of these first two stories run maybe only 10, 11 minutes long. And but it's a nice creepy story of this guy who is having an affair. He gets into an auto accident and he pretty much literally rises from the grave, and we get to see his point of view of this homeless man is terrified upon seeing him and starts running off. It was like, really? So what does he look like? Oh, you'll see. It'll come about eventually. I mean, they know when to pay off during these stories. It's like the guy's like, nope. No, thank you. You can get the next ride. He might be willing to take you somewhere. Yeah, these point of view shots can always guarantee a little creepy crawly. Uh oh. Goes home to his wife. What is her reaction? Oh my god. Now, okay, the wife here is played by an actress named Susan Denny, who unfortunately did no other films after this. Yeah, she says that Carl died 2 years ago in a crash. It's me. Well, at least she didn't scream. At least she didn't scream this time. Yeah, he notices all the changed furniture and everything, and then wait for it. Wait for it, ladies and gentlemen. Damn. I got to admit, when I saw that earlier today, it got to me. It got to me. I wasn't expecting that. I was not expecting that to come at all. That was really really cool. And they get into an accident anyway, despite the fact he just woke up from what was, evidently a dream. They end up getting into a massive car accident anyway. Oh. So that is why you were in a hurry. Now, Ralph Richardson, who plays the Crypt Keeper, we got to be a little quick with him because he only appears in like these inserts between the stories. But Ralph Richardson, he was an English actor along with John Gielgud and Laurence Olivier, one of the trinity of male actors who dominated the British stage for much of the 20th century. Now, I've already talked about him, I think, in great detail in another commentary. I just have to refresh my memory on what it is real quick. Hmm. I know I've already talked about him before. now known as Sir Ralph Richardson. But he was in The Heiress, Anna Karenina with Vivian Leigh, Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, the 1955 version of Richard III, directed by Laurence Olivier, Dragon Slayer, Oh Lucky Man, one of my personal favorites, Exodus, The Man from Havana, Eagle in a Cage, Dr. Zhivago, Rollerball, the original Rollerball, and, Twelfth Night, David Copperfield, stuff like that. Stuff like that. Very long career. Oh, I guess I didn't do a commentary on him. I thought I did. Well, I know I've talked about him before. I know he's appeared in another film that I have talked about. I guess I just completely forgot. Huh. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. But anyway, so here we are in the third story, and here is the great Peter Cushing, who, as I said before, one last time was in Star Wars. That's how most people know him today. Although he started out as Dracula and Frankenstein. Uh, he appeared in as Dr. Van Helsing in the 5 Dracula movies, and his role as Baron von Frankenstein in 22 horror films from the Hammer Studio. And he was also in 6 of the 7 Frankenstein movies. He was also in the Abominable Snowman, The Mummy, and Hound of the Baskervilles, both in 1959. Christopher Lee actually played the Mummy. A lot of people will think of either Boris Karloff, Brendan Fraser, or actually Arnold Vosloo played the Mummy in that, but whatever, and Tom Cruise. But yeah, there was a great 1959 version of the Mummy with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, which highly, highly recommend you all check out if you like mummy movies, that is. But he started all the way back in 1939 in The Man in the Iron Mask. And in the 1940s, he did movies like The Howards of Virginia, Vigil of the Night, 1950s, The Black Knight, Moulin Rouge, Magic Fire, Alexander the Great. And then in 1957, that's when he did The Curse of Frankenstein, the first lead role in a Hammer horror film as Victor Frankenstein, of course. Then he played Dr. Van Helsing in Dracula, Dr. Victor Stein in The Revenge of Frankenstein, Sherlock Holmes in the Hound of the Baskervilles, Captain Richard Pearson in John Paul Jones. Sheriff of Nottingham in The Sword of Sherwood Forest. We keep going back to Robin Hood for some reason with this. The Naked Edge, Captain Clegg, The Man Who Finally Died, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors again, The Skull, Island of Terror, Frankenstein Created Woman, The Blood Beast Terror, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, and then in the 1970s, he did movies like Twins of Evil, The House That Dripped Blood. And in 1972, he did Tales from the Crypt, Dr. Fives Rises Again. He actually had a bit part in that, which we did a commentary for that earlier this week. He's also in Dracula AD 1972, as well as Horror Express. We will be doing commentaries on those in the upcoming weeks. Stand by for that. As well as The Creeping Flesh, Satanic Rites of Dracula, Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, Tender Dracula. Okay. At the Earth's Core, The Uncanny Arabian Adventure, House of Long Shadows. He was in Top Secret in 1984 with Val Kilmer. And that's about it. Yeah, and he passed away in 1994 at the age of 81. But yeah, he is the star of the third story here, which is called Poetic Justice, which is taken from the magazine The Haunt of Fear number 12, which was published from March to April of 1952, where Peter Cushing plays an elderly dustman, and James Elliott, played by Robin Phillips right here, has apparently such a strong dislike of the guy that he decides to ruin his life by, he does a smear campaign against him. He has all of his beloved dogs taken by animal control. Yeah, he does some pretty horrible, horrible things to this guy. But Peter Cushing, actually, he really does generate a lot of empathy in this role. And at the end of the segment, that's when he really makes a massive impression. He's terrific in this. I don't like the idea of ranking any of these stories, and that's why I didn't really want to bother with like comparisons or things like that. I mean, I don't think I've decided what my personal favorite story is yet, though. I really do love Peter Cushing in this particular one, though. Now, and the other actors in this segment are Robin Phillips, who plays James Elliott, and he passed away in 2015 at the age of 75. He was also in Doctor Who, The Keys of Marinus, The Saint, The Avengers, David Copperfield, and Decline and Fall of a Bird Watcher. Though none of his stage productions were captured on film, Phillips is featured in the documentary Robin and the Mark of Richard III, which he guides TV actor Mark McKinney through some key scenes in Shakespeare's Richard III. But he was mostly known for his theater work. He was hired as an artistic director at the Stratford Festival in Canada in 1975, where he spent 6 seasons directing many productions and cultivating new talent. Maggie Smith, Richard Manette, Martha Henry, and Brian Bedford, among others, were prominently featured during his tenure. And many of his Shakespearean, classical, and contemporary productions won widespread acclaim, particularly Richard III. And his father, Edward, is played by David Markham, who was a BBC radio dramatist during World War II, had 4 daughters. He was imprisoned as a conscientious objector before being allowed to do forestry work. Oh, appeared occasionally in cinema and often on television. Two English Girls, Day for Night, uh, and also Two Gentlemen Sharing, where he also played the father of Robin Phillips again, like he does here in Tales from the Crypt. And he was also in Blood from the Mummy's Tomb. I've never seen that, but I like that title. I just like the title. The Stars Look Down, Feelings, The Three Hostages. He was in Roman Polanski's Tess, and then finally Winston Churchill, The Wilderness Years. His last role was in the Best Picture winning Gandhi from 1982, and he passed away in 1983 at the age of 70. Mm-hmm. So yeah, my bad. He was a BBC radio dramatist after World War II, where he was doing forestry work because he was a conscientious objector. But yeah, that's David Markham for you. And is there another? No, I think that's it. Okay. So this is a messed up story. I mean, what they do to this poor guy is just, beyond it's beyond cruel. And you look at a story like this and you just wow. I mean, they just have to torture this guy till he is essentially dead. And really it's all from the son. I mean, the father doesn't really have anything to do with this, but the father doesn't really like him either. Just one more turn of the screw. Uh, but having your dogs taken is one thing, uh, but but then he persuades a member of the council to have him removed from his job, and later exploiting parents' paranoid fears about child molestation. That's when you're really going too far. Um, Unbeknownst to James Elliott, Peter Cushing's character dabbles in the occult and holds a seance by himself to confer with his late wife. And That's after this Valentine's Day card, which kind of seals the son's campaign of terror against this poor guy. I don't like that. A tree is beautiful if its owner prunes it, but our town isn't because, oh, look at that. How cruel. Your presence. I mean, how cruel is this? God, man, jump. Yeah, just jump in the river. Like, really? Oh, devastating. Just devastating. Excuse me one moment. And after that Valentine's Day card, we realize we haven't heard a peep out of Peter Cushing's house. Haven't seen him for days, not since Valentine's Day. Oh. Oh, no problem, Edwin. No problem at all. Just got home from my sister's birthday bash. Oh, well, happy birthday to her. Absolutely. We are 44 minutes. We just crossed the 44-minute mark of Tales from the Crypt, which, like I said, is available on YouTube. We're just getting through the third story segment here of the anthology. And and what do we discover? Oh no, he hung himself. And notice he has only one slipper left on. One actually stayed on as he struggled on the noose there. Very, very sad. Oh, and the poor dog, man. I mean, I love the fact that a dog actually returned to Peter Cushing and comforted him, when he was at his lowest point. But oh man, this is just devastating, man. Absolutely devastating. But we haven't reached the best part of the story yet. Not even close. I mean, is this guy so obsessed that he's still going to dishonor the guy in death? Is he that paranoid? Is he that sociopathic? Oh. So if the first segment is a perfect Christmas segment, then this is a perfect Valentine's Day segment, right? Yeah, I'm sure your lady friend will find this super romantic. Especially the climax of the story. I mean, I would love to see anyone's reaction to that climax if they were going to watch it together. February the 14th, a year ago. Great smoky shot of a local cemetery right here. I always felt a good companion of sorts to this is Trilogy of Terror, with Creepshow being an awesome successor of sorts. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I don't think I've seen Trilogy of Terror either, though. Also, I mean, I've seen Creepshow. And I know what Trilogy of Terror is. Yeah, it was 1975 made for TV anthology horror film from the guy that made Dark Shadows and starring Karen Black. Well, stand by. In 3 years, I'll be doing an audio commentary for Trilogy of Terror. And I may even do another Amicus production as a follow up to that. Yeah, I think I like these Amicus anthologies almost as much as I like the American International pictures of this time too, including the Dr. Phibes movies. But I mean, there is genuine suspense in a lot of these stories. And like I said, I like the gallery of actors, gallery of British talent that we have on display here. And we're going to get a lot more of that with Asylum when we get to that. Oh, I want to welcome a couple new subscribers, Lenny Crocus and Scott Stevens. Thank you so much. Glad to have you both aboard. And like I said, when we finish Tales from the Crypt, I'm actually going to stop uh, pretty much right when we see the end credits. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to jump on another stream on my channel to do the 50th anniversary audio commentary for Asylum, which is another horror anthology from 1972 from the same production company, Amicus Productions. But Peter Cushing looks awesome. Yes. Yeah, he just rose from the grave and just took him. It's like that looked like you're coming with me. This was great. I here again. This was something else that I wasn't expecting at all. I mean, what a awesome way to conclude this story. Which here again, it fuels the idea that this is like a Valentine's Day horror story. Happy Valentine's Day. You were mean and cruel. Right from the start. Now you really have no. Nice. Yeah. Here's your son's heart for you. Nice. Hell of a Valentine's Day story. Hell of a Valentine's Day. And of course, the Crypt Keeper is just like, yeah. I mean, Ralph Richardson is admittedly not as animated as as the later Crypt Keeper, obviously. I mean, he doesn't really, I don't think, have that Crypt Keeper sense of humor, which here again, I mean, I think that may be something when people discover this, they might be a little disappointed about. But look, I still think that this is a quite successful horror anthology. I don't have much to complain about any of the stories here. I really don't. I think they all work in their own ways. They all have great talent on display. They tell their little horror stories very effectively and very cleverly. And I just like how it all comes together at the end. Now we've reached the fourth segment. This is number 4, which is called "Wish You Were Here," taken from The Haunt of Fear, number 22, which was published in December of 1953. Yeah, there were 3 different magazines. There was Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, and The Haunt of Fear. And this is a variation on the W. Jacobs short story, The Monkey's Paw, which they actually do mention at one point. That story was first published in England in the collection The Lady of the Barge in 1902. In the story, 3 wishes are granted to the owner of the monkey's paw, but the wishes come with an enormous price for interfering with fate. Now, the actor who plays the lawyer in this movie, right there sitting in the chair with the mustache, That is an actor by the name of Roy Dotrice. And I swear, when I started watching this and his name popped up, I'm like, okay, there is a movie I adore with him in it, but I can't recognize his face. I only know his name from something. And I realized after looking in his filmography, he played the Russian skating coach to in the Cutting Edge. He played Moira Kelly's skating coach who was Russian. And he said Zach Kanise, which means shut up, a number of times. Uh, yeah, and he trained both DB Sweeney and Moira Kelly in that movie, which is one of my favorite romantic comedies of all time, literally. But we'll see more of Roy later. But for right now, here is Richard Green and his wife Enid, played by Barbara Murray. Now, Richard Green was a matinee idol who appeared in more than 40 films, perhaps best known for the lead role in the long-running British TV series, wait for it, The Adventures of Robin Hood. See, where are all these Robin Hood connections coming from? The Adventures of Robin Hood ran for 143 episodes from 1955 to 1959. At 20, he joined 20th Century Fox as a rival to MGM's Robert Taylor. His first film for Fox was John Ford's Four Men and a Prayer. Green was a huge success, especially with female filmgoers, who sent him mountains of fan mail, which at its peak rivaled that of Fox star Tyrone Power. Green co-starred with Sonia Heine in My Lucky Star. Henny, not Heine, sorry. That was kind of unintentional, but anyway. Was reunited with John Ford in Submarine Patrol. Zanuck put him in Kentucky with Loretta Young and Walter Brennan. Green was the romantic male lead in the Shirley Temple vehicle, The Little Princess, from 1939. That's one of her most famous films, actually. And was Sir Henry Baskerville in the 1939 Sherlock Holmes film, The Hound of the Baskervilles. The film marked the first pairing of Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, but it was Richard Green, who was top billed. Green had a support part in Stanley and Livingstone, 1939, with Spencer Tracy, and the lead in Here I Am a Stranger in 1939. He co-starred with Alice Faye and Fred McMurray in Little Old New York, and supported Vera Zorina in I Was an Adventuress. He tried to enlist in the Seaforth Highlanders in Vancouver, but they would not give him a commission. He obtained a release from Fox, traveled to England during World War II, where he enlisted in the 27th Lancers, where he distinguished himself. After 3 months, he went to the Royal Military College in Sandhurst. This was all after he was started as an actor at 20th Century Fox. Seriously. He was commissioned and given the service number of 184251. He was promoted to captain in the 27th Lancers in May 1944. He was given leave in 1942 to appear in the British propaganda films Flying Fortress for Warner Brothers and Unpublished Story with Valerie Hobson. In 1943, appeared in the Anne Neagle thriller Yellow Canary while on leave. He also appeared in a British comedy called Don't Take It to the Heart. He later toured in Shaw's Arms and the Man, entertaining the troops. Green was discharged in December 1944 and appeared in the stage play Desert Rats. After the war, he starred in a British musical distributed by Warner's, Gaiety George, which was a flop. He returned to Hollywood, appeared in Fox's big-budget Forever Amber in support of Cornell Wilde. He also returned to England for That Dangerous Age and Now Barnabas, The Desert Hawk, My Daughter Joy, Shadow of the Eagle, The Rival of the Empress. And in Hollywood, Edward Small asked him to play the male hero of Laura Doone in 1951. He stayed on to star in The Black Castle and Peter Lawford in Rogue's March. And then he did The Adventures of Robin Hood in the late 1950s. After that, he did other TV shows like Dixon of Dock Green, Tales of the Unexpected. He was also replaced by Douglas Wilmer to play Sir Dennis Nayland Smith in two Fu Manchu movies, The Blood of Fu Manchu, 1968, and The Castle of Fu Manchu in 1969. Both were directed by Jess Franco and shot in Spain. Now, here's the last thing to say about Richard Green, and this is fascinating. In 1972, the same year as Tales from the Crypt, when it was released, Green was unwittingly embroiled in the Lewis versus Avery court case after a fraudster pretended to be Green had purchased a vehicle. No, seriously, this is the facts of the case. A rogue impersonating Richard Green, a popular actor from The Adventures of Robin Hood, told the plaintiff who had advertised to the sale of his car and offered to buy it for the advertised price, £450. Subsequently, the rogue appended his signature that clearly displayed R.A. Green on a check which he presented to the seller. As a result, he was granted the chance of taking away the car. The check bounced, and the buyer was indeed not Richard Green. He sold the car to Avery, a third party who purchased the car in good faith, and action was brought against Avery for conversion. The judgment, the Court of Appeal, following Phillips versus Brooks, held that despite his mistake, the plaintiff had completed a contract with the rogue. Lord Deming MR held there was no operative mistake and the property had passed to the rogue. Therefore, Mr. Avery got to keep the car. He held there was nothing to displace the Ingram versus Little presumption here, and that case had, quote, special facts. So, yeah, that's the story of Richard Green when he got involved in all that. But here is Roy Dotrice, and he's talking to Richard Green's wife right here, played by Barbara Murray. She passed away in 2014 at the age of 84, and she played fresh-faced leading ladies in many British films such as Passport to Pimlico, Meet Me, Mr. Lucifer, The Punch and Judy Man, Rudyard Kipling's Plain Tales from the Hills from 1964, The Planemakers, The Power Game, Danger Man, Doctor Who, Albert and Victoria. Let's see. Oh, her first uncredited role was actually in the Vivien Leigh version of Anna Karenina. I've read Anna Karenina, but I've never seen the Vivien Leigh version. Tales from the Crypt was one of her last films. After this, she was in The Curse of King Tut's Tomb in 1980, The Power 1984, and her last film role was The Harpist in 1999. And Roy Dotrice, as far as his other films are concerned, I mean, I mentioned The Cutting Edge, obviously, but he was also in Saturn III with Harvey Keitel and Kirk Douglas, Nicholas and Alexandra in 1971, A Twist of Sand, Lock Up Your Daughters, Beauty and the Beast, the television series, Babylon 5, The Scarlet Letter as Reverend Thomas Cheever, and he was also in the TV series Angel, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army was his very last film, as King Baylor, and he also was in Game of Thrones as Hawleen. But he passed away at the age of 94. At the age of 94, just 4 years ago, in 2017. So yeah, here he comes outside while making a huge mistake. Obviously making a massive mistake in letting her do her last wish, which guess what it's going to be. I wish Ralph were alive now. No, don't do it now. Because a lot of people in the audience have probably forgotten that, well, look, he's not just going to come back alive, but oh no! That doesn't mean he still has the embalming fluid entrenched into his body. Oh no! I wished him alive again. He's been embalmed. His brains are filled with embalming fluid burning into his brain. Oh no. That is horrible. I mean, I can't imagine how painful that must be, if anything else. Okay, now so she decides to grab a sword and chop him to bits. But what she clearly forgot is that she wished that he would stay alive forever. Oh, oh, shrimp and chicken. Oh yeah. You, you screwed up. You screwed up. Lifelong consequence now. You wished him alive forever. Kill him. Every piece of him is alive. He's still going to be alive. Every single piece of him is going to be alive forever. You know, like, how could you have screwed up that badly? You could have wished for anything. You could have wished for anything. And that, of course, sets up the very last segment, the fifth and final story segment of Tales from the Crypt. We have just passed the 1 hour and 3 minute mark, and we got about 29 minutes left to go. But the very last segment, which, you know what, now that I think about it, I do think the last segment is my favorite. I mean, I think they did indeed save the best for last right here. Now, this is the Elmridge Home for the Blind, and as we see a guy in fancy clothes get out of his car with his very sinister looking dog here, as he goes into this Institute for the Blind. Now, this story is called Blind Alleys, and it's taken from Tales from the Crypt number 46, which was published from February to March of 1955. Now, I should mention that because we haven't really talked about much about EC comics or entertaining comics, but you know, they specialized in horror fiction, crime fiction, satire, military fiction, dark fantasy, and science fiction from the 1940s all throughout the mid 1950s. And it was actually in 1955 when censorship issues and pressures prompted it to concentrate on the humor magazine Mad, and leading to the company's greatest and most enduring success. Consequently, by 1956, the company ceased publishing all its comic lines except Mad magazine. But Tales from the Crypt, the actual magazine, we haven't really talked about the comics. We should get that out of the way right now since we're at the very last story. But it was popular in the late 40s and early 50s, and it came under attack from parents, clergymen, school teachers, and others who believed the books contributed to illiteracy and juvenile delinquency. In April of June of 1954, highly publicized congressional subcommittee hearings on the effects of comic books upon children left the industry shaken. With the subsequent impression of a highly restrictive comics code, EC Comics publisher Bill Gaines canceled Tales from the Crypt and its two companion horror titles, along with the company's remaining crime and science fiction series, in September of 1954. There was intended to be a fourth book, because I mentioned the three books, Tales from the Crypt, The Vault of Horror, and there was another one. Well, there was supposed to be a fourth one called The Crypt of Terror, and they were stopped dead in their tracks. Following the publication of Frederick Wertham's Seduction of the Innocent, horror and other violent comics had come under scrutiny by parents, school teachers, etc., who viewed the material as dangerous to the well-being of children and a significant contributor to the juvenile delinquency crisis in America. Matters came to a head in April and June 1954 with a highly publicized Senate subcommittee. Hearings targeted violent comic books, which fared poorly in the proceedings. When the committee stopped short of blaming the comics industry for juvenile delinquency, they did suggest it tone down the product. The industry definitely avoided outside censorship by creating the self-regulatory Comics Magazine Association of America and a Comics Code Authority that placed severe restrictions on violent comic book genres. Publishers were forbidden from using the words terror and horror in titles, for example, and forbidden from depicting zombies, werewolves, and other gruesome characters in auteur horror fiction trappings. Gaines was fed up. He believed his titles were being specifically targeted, which they were, and realized they were doomed to future failure. He threw in the towel, canceling Tales from the Crypt and its companion titles in September of 1954. Since an issue of The Crypt of Terror had already been produced, it was published as the final issue of Tales from the Crypt in February and March of 1955. Now, it started being reprinted in the mid-1960s, fully collected in a series of 5 black and white hardbacks by publisher Russ Cochran as part of the complete EC library in 1979. Between September 1992 and December 1999, Cochran and Gemstone Publishing reprinted the full 30 individual issues. This complete run was later rebound with covers included in a series of 6 soft-color EC annuals. In 2007, Cochran and Gemstone began to publish hardcover recolored volumes of Tales from the Crypt as part of the EC Archive series. 3 volumes of a projected 5 were published before Gemstone's financial troubles left the project in limbo. The project was then revived under a new publisher, Dark Horse Comics, which has resumed it with the release of Tales from the Crypt Volume 4 in October of 2013 and Volume 5 in November of 2014. And The Crypt Keeper. Although EC's horror stable consisted of 3 separate magazines, there was little beyond their titles to distinguish them. Each magazine had its titular host, but the hosting duties for any one issue were typically shared with the hosts of the other 2. Thus, a single issue of Tales from the Crypt would contain 2 stories told by the Crypt Keeper, one by the Vault Keeper of Vault of Horror, and one by the Old Witch of the Haunt of Fear. The professional rivalry among these 3 ghoul lunatics was often played for comic effect. The Crypt Keeper was the primary host of Tales from the Crypt. He was introduced to the public in Crime Patrol number 15, and he continued with that magazine through its changes in title and format. He was a frightening presence in those early issues, a sinister hermit sitting framed in the lightless crypt's half-open door, his face all but hidden by the double curtain of his long white hair. But he soon evolved into a more comedic horror host, delivering an irreverent and pun-filled commentary to lighten the horrific tone of the stories he introduced. The Crypt Keeper's duties were not limited to hosting. He would occasionally appear as a character as well, and these appearances gave the reader a glimpse of his biography, The Lower Birth. Tales from the Crypt number 33 gives an account of the circumstances surrounding his birth. While the Cat's Away, Vault of Horror number 34, conducts a tour of his house above and below ground, and Horror Beneath the Streets tells how he and his fellow ghoul lunatics got their EC publishing contracts. The Crypt Keeper also served as the host of EC's 3D comic book Three-Dimensional Tales from the Crypt of Terror, characters played by Ralph Richardson in the 1972 film, and more famously by John Cassar in the 1989 television series. And it was an HBO series which featured John Cassar and included comic book covers designed to look like the original 1950s covers by Mike Vosberg, with at least one drawn by Sean McManus. In 1993, Tales from the Crypt was adapted into a Saturday morning cartoon series entitled Tales from the Crypt Keeper. Based on the series, albeit none of the violence or other questionable content that was in the original series, and Cassar as the Crypt Keeper again, ran from September 18th, 1993 to December 4th, 1999. 2 films by Universal Studios, Demon Knight and Bordello of Blood, were based on the series, neither of which was particularly successful with critics. A 3rd film, Ritual, was slated for theatrical release in 2001, but was only distributed internationally without the Tales from the Crypt connection until 2006, when it was released in DVD in the United States with the Crypt Keeper segments restored. Unlike the 1970s era Amicus films, These films were not based on stories from any of the EC comics. The Frighteners, directed by Peter Jackson, that's one of my favorite horror films, was intended to be another film in the series, but executive producer Robert Zemeckis decided to release it as a standalone film. So yeah, The Frighteners was originally supposed to be like Tales from the Crypt presents The Frighteners, like they did with Bordello of Blood and Demon Knight. In 2012, the Crypt Keeper hosted FearNet's Tales from the Crypt New Year's Shocking Eve Marathon. Voice actor John Kassir continued to play him along with puppeteer and programmer Tim Lewis and Ian Murray. In early 2016, it was announced M. Night Shyamalan is producing a reboot of the 1989 TV series as part of TNT's new horror block. In June 2017, it was announced the plans for the reboot have been shelved due to licensing issues. Yeah. So this is the final story segment of the 1972 film Tales from the Crypt. And we have right here a very familiar face to fans of Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. This is Patrick Macnee in the role of resident George Carter, who wants to make the living conditions more bearable and get medical treatment for a resident who is in fact dying. Now, look, I've seen Clockwork Orange so many times. I did a commentary for it on last year, and just, you know, him trying to take revenge on Malcolm McDowell for raping his wife is very, very shocking. Near the end, his bodyguard is played by David Prowse, who of course later played in the Darth Vader suit in Star Wars films. And just never forget after the bath when he realizes that Malcolm McDowell is the man who murdered his wife. He decides to make him an Italian dinner. He makes him some pasta with some wine and everything. And just, when he comes out in his wheelchair and he just stares at Malcolm McDowell, ready to kill him, essentially, he's like, "Try the wine." So, he's like, "Food, all right? Well, try the wine." Patrick Macnee is Maggie is actually just glorious in that. He was also in Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon. Yeah, he played who was it? The Chevalier du Balabari in Barry Lyndon. Other films he's been in, he started out in 1960 in a movie called The Criminal. In 1963, he was in Francis Ford Coppola's first film, which was Dementia 13. He was also in Ricochet, The Young Racers, Zulu. He played Surgeon James Henry Reynolds in Zulu, starring Michael Caine. Seance on a Wet Afternoon, The Mask of the Red Death with Vincent Price, The Skull, Die Monster Die, Decline and Fall of a Birdwatcher. We mentioned that before, I know. The Trojan Women, Clockwork Orange, 1971's King Lear. He was also in Tales from the Crypt. We will see him in Asylum coming up here in a bit. And now the screaming starts, Telephone, The Bronte Sisters. And his last few films were in 1980 and 1981. He was in Chariots of Fire as Lord Cadogan. I did a commentary on Chariots of Fire in May. He was also in The Monster Club, The Black Cat, and his last movie was The Blood of Dr. Jekyll. And he passed away in 1982 at the very young age of 60. I mean, I know he looks a lot older. He looks a lot older in these films, but he's, yeah. Mm-hmm. So when I realized they put all this meat on the plate because they're going to essentially do this very elaborate death for the head of the blind institute for basically letting their own die due to not getting him medical help that he desperately needed. Now, see, the dog automatically sniffs the meat and goes to and he's so distracted by other stuff that he doesn't even notice that the dog or the meat. Look at that chain around the dog's neck. Like that is a dog you do not want to mess with. Aw, but they look so cute when they eat the meat off the floor. And so you'll see where the dog goes and eating all that meat right there. Mm. But the actor playing Major William Rogers right here, he's an actor by the name of Nigel Patrick. During the late 1940s and 50s, he became known as a debonair leading man in British films, though he could also portray rogues. He was featured in The Sound Barrier in 1952 under the direction of David Lean. And virtually all his films, I do not recognize any of the titles for because he mainly just made movies in England. Battle of Britain is here, The Virgin Soldiers, The Trials of Oscar Wilde. Well, he was in Raintree County in 1957, and the Pickwick Papers, 1952. His last film was in 1978, a British comedy thriller film called Silver Bears. And here in Tales from the Crypt, he plays, of course, Major William Rogers. Now, in this final segment, I kind of noticed that all the blind individuals are they almost act like zombies at points. I mean, there are several moments where they really do look like they're from straight out of Night of the Living Dead or something like that. I mean, and apparently they're remarkably resourceful because this elaborate death that they planned for the head of the institute is amazing, mind blowing, as a matter of fact. Uh, they wanted to get back at him in the most vicious, most cruel way possible, and I think that they kind of succeeded, as you will soon see. But let me do a shout out again to everybody in the chat: Edwin Roman, Katrina, Cliff Booth. Oh, wonderful! I forgot to mention you, sir. Two with Peter Cushing, can't beat that. Yep, absolutely. Rob and Katrina. Yeah, so I want to thank you all again for coming out tonight. We will be starting Asylum pretty much right after this movie. 5-minute break. I'm going to provide the link actually right now to the Asylum commentary on YouTube, which is on my same channel, of course. Get it right here. Okay. See, there we go. And see, we're coming up on the 1 hour 21-minute mark, the 1 hour 21-minute mark of Tales from the Crypt. So about 12 minutes. I think we will get started with that at 10:45. There you go, right there. There's the link for Asylum, and like I said, we'll start that at 10:45 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and change it right now. $45. Yeah, there we go. All right, that's good to go. So yeah, pretty much when this is over, there's the link that you can go to. I'll be there in just a few minutes. Yep, take a bathroom break and all that good stuff. Oh, Patrick and Maggie. Yeah, I can imagine the casting people, watching A Clockwork Orange and thinking, "Oh, we got to get this guy. We definitely got to get this guy." And of course, he's desperately asking, "Oh, please feed my dog. Just please feed the dog. Oh, in due time. He'll be fed in due time." But this guy is not going to get any pasta and wine. That's for sure. He's not going to get that kind of treatment. Blaring Beethoven into the room or whatever. No. No, these old blind guys are going to do something a lot more creative than that. And if you've never seen this before, you are in for a real treat. Although some of you will probably guess where this is kind of leading up to already. It was like, oh, wait a minute. That dog is probably getting awfully hungry right about now. Awfully hungry. Mm-hmm. Now, let me see. I think that's it for. Um, oh yeah, so yeah, their friend he died of hypothermia. That's what specifically he died of. Yeah. Milton Subotsky, he wrote the screenplay for Tales from the Crypt. Of Amicus Productions, had been a long fan of EC Comics' Tales from the Crypt, and eventually persuaded his partner Max Rosenberg to buy the rights. The copyright owner William Gaines insisted on script approval. The budget of £170,000 was higher than usual for an Amicus production and was partly funded by American International Pictures. Awesome. Peter Cushing was originally offered the part played by Richard Green, but wanted to try something different and played the elderly Grimsdyke instead. Filming started September 13th, 1971, finished in 1972. On Rotten Tomatoes, 90% approval rating by critics with positive reviews. 90%. All movies said it has a certain magnetism about it that is hard to resist and which accounts for its enduring popularity. There's something about Crypt that makes even jaded viewers feel like they're kids sitting in their rooms late at night with the lights out telling eerie tales with the aid of a flashlight. Yes, I agree with that. Vincent Canby of the New York Times wrote that the film lacks style and is too heavy-handed in its morality. Eric Henderson of Slant Magazine rated it 2.5 out of 5, wrote that the undercurrent of sternness is tempered by a fully bottomless roster of campy excess. Chris Alexander of Fangoria wrote, from its first frames to the invasive final shot, this classic British creeper offers an unrelenting study in the art of the macabre. Anthony Arrigo of Dread Central wrote, the greatest strength in Tales comes not from the acting or directing, both of which are perfectly sound, but in the rich stories culled from the comics. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 3 out of 4 stars, saying it's put together something like the comic books, with the old Crypt Keeper acting as host and narrator. In the movie version, he's played with suitable ham by Ralph Richardson. And if you want to get the film on Blu-ray, it was actually paired with the Vault of Horror, and Shout Factory released them together on a double feature Blu-ray on December 2nd, 2014. All right. We are coming up near the end here, where he's basically kind of trapped in this tunnel that the blind have built, and he has to get down a corridor with a shit ton of razor blades on both sides. Yeah, I think I would take my chances and just try to dig my way out of anywhere else. I would take my chances and go the other way and try to figure some other way to get out because oh, this is horrible. I just don't think it'd be worth trying. I don't think it would be worth just trying even. All right, so we're getting to the end here, but there's a couple of other things I need to mention real quick. The 2007 Region 1 DVD from 20th Century Fox contains some extra scenes when compared to the original theatrical and previous home video releases. At the conclusion of the story Poetic Justice, previous releases showed the man begin to open up the bottom part of the Valentine's letter, which has actually heart in it. Then cuts to him screaming and covering his face with his hands. Cut back to the letter to reveal still beating severed heart inside the paper. It actually shows the heart when he opens the letter. His scream is heard off screen. Then it cuts to him covering his face and cuts back to the shot in the heart. In the story Wish You Were Here, when Enid chops Ralph with the saber, there's a shot of Ralph's exposed intestines, which was not present in previous versions. Oh. In order to receive a cinematic X rating from the BBFC, a brief close up of a man's exposed intestines was removed. That's why. The same print was later released on video by CBS Fox in 1998. And as far as just a few other random bits, Peter Cushing is said to, quote, act as himself in the movie. Cushing's wife had died recently, and he was very depressed. Oh, his character is a widower who uses a Ouija board to talk with his dead wife. Only two stories in the movie, Reflection of Death and Blind Alleys, originally appeared in EC Comics' Tales from the Crypt. All the other ones appeared in The Haunt of Fear or Vault of Horror. And All Through the House was remade by producer and director Robert Zemeckis as a second episode of the 1989 Tales from the Crypt. Peter Cushing wanted to do the movie so much he took a lower fee. The role of Grimsdyke was at first a tiny non-speaking role, but was greatly expanded when Peter Cushing took an interest. Robert Zemeckis says this is his favorite movie to watch on Halloween since it was released. He produced the HBO series Tales from the Crypt based on the comic book series. I didn't know that was his favorite movie, though. Sir Ralph Richardson as the Crypt Keeper filmed his whole thing in a day. Now, at the end here, I started to think, okay, so here one guy has already jumped to his death in a fiery pit, and now they all realize, oh shit, we're all going to die, aren't we? I mean, if I was Ralph Richardson as the Crypt Keeper, and I think this would have been, just funny, but I would have been like, no. All the men go ahead and go in there, but Joan Collins is going to stay with me. Hey, look, come on. The Crypt Keeper doesn't even want to keep Joan Collins. What the hell is the matter with you? Seriously. She can be by my side as I judge other people before they jump into my fire pit. Who's next? Break the fourth wall. Breaking the fourth wall right here. Yep. And so, yeah, we conclude Tales from the Crypt, the original film from 1972. See, there's a Crypt Keeper. Automatically, the Sir Ralph Richardson gets his name blown up above everybody else. And we have our cast through each segment, the Crypt Keeper, all throughout the house. Yeah. Reflection of Death with Ian Hendry. Poetic Justice with Peter Cushing and Robin Phillips. Now, these credits are slow, though. Wish You Were Here with Richard Green and Barbara Murray and Roy Dotrice, of course. Yep. And finally, last but not least, Blind Alleys with Nigel Patrick Magee. And there you go. So yeah, that's Tales from the Crypt. I hope you all enjoyed it. The end, and I think it just says produced at Shepperton Studios, Shepperton, Middlesex in England. So at any rate, I will see you all a bit later. Just go to the link for the movie Asylum. And the movie is available on YouTube. It is available on YouTube. I'm going to be watching it over at Amazon Prime, but it is available on YouTube for all that want to watch it. But that is the link for the commentary. I will see you all in approximately 7 to 8 minutes.